Oh, but even is fine.
Okay, I think we'll start inshallah, because we can't wait too long. I've had about, I think, 5-6 messages from staff saying that they'll be late. So. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, because it's the last weekend before we break up for the 2-week Christmas holidays, so one thing we just need to do is announce that to the students during today's lesson at any time. And and plus we are going to be sending out, WhatsApp messages, and also it's going to be on our website. So we just need to remind the students that next 2 weeks there is no madrasa. So that's one thing. And also because it's like coming up to, it's just past 4 years since we started. So I thought we'll quickly talk a bit about how far we've come, literally within 5-10 minutes. And I just want to talk about this textbook and where I got it from and what it's about, which I think will be useful for maybe all the classes if it's adopted well. And it fits in well with our science and Islam stuff that we're doing. Okay, so alhamdulillah, yesterday we had open day. So we had about 35 plus parents that came. So because everything was pending on this, whether we're going to start 1 or 2 classes. So we've got about, I think, 25 or 30 new students joining. So what that means is we're going to start 2 new classes on Saturday. The reason why we're starting 2 is the age group is quite wide. So it goes from 4 all the way till 7. So the idea is we're going to have a class of age 4 and 5, and then second class 6 and 7. And within that, there's going to be about maybe 10 to 12 students in each class initially, and there'll be 2 members of staff in each class, and then we'll just add on to those over the coming months. So that's what's going to happen on Saturday, inshallah. So once we've done that, we will have no more new classes starting on Saturday or Sunday. That will be it. And we're just going to be adding on to those when they leave. And then we are trying to start a weekday madrasa. It's all about the places. There's always, we find a place and then something is not right, or something's not good, or it's too expensive, or there's always things coming up. We have seen a place, which we're chasing them up. It's on Wood Street. But I'll give you more details once it goes ahead more permanently, inshallah. So the discussion we had about the weekday stuff, that will, we'll reignite that discussion. And then if it does go ahead, that would be our space permanently for the whole entire week. So we can do other things as well, inshallah. And that would include maybe teaching adults. So those who have done alim class and alima classes, you can kind of make use of that as well, inshallah. So just very quickly about yesterday. It was very interesting because the parents that came yesterday, they had a lot of questions as well. They were excited. There was one interesting thing that happened. There was a parent sitting there who I didn't know that she had already been, she already had 2 children here for 6 months, and so she was listening to the whole thing, and then she jumped in and said, "Look, oh, you forgot to say this. You did this as well. You forgot to." So she started mentioning a few things, and then she gave her feedback for a good 10 minutes. She continued the lecture. So I think she made that edge with all the parents, and they were like, "Yeah, this is good." And then we promised everyone that we didn't pay her to do that. Yeah, but it was good. And then, so I think, and another thing that I mentioned to them yesterday was, the PowerPoint that I had, which I created 4 years ago, that was made, and this I realized just 2 days ago. That PowerPoint was made when there was no madrasa happening, when madrasa was just an idea. So therefore, there was about 90 slides on there trying to explain everything in detail. And then I mentioned to them, look, there's no, and then I slashed about 30 of them, because there was no need for that anymore, because we have our madrasa in practice for the last 4 years. So I think some of the main points that I want to just talk about today was why we're doing certain things the way we do them. So for example, we want more of this. So coming back to, for example, the wudu lesson, that's an example that we always give. And the reason why we give the wudu lesson example in open day as well is because a lot of the books, the fiqh texts, they begin with tahara. So they begin with cleanliness. So for example, what we're saying to parents is that we don't want to divide up the lessons on, like, okay, one day we'll do fiqh, the next day we'll do aqidah, and we'll do this and we'll do that. We're trying to bring and merge as much of that possible, okay, and make it more organic and more natural, more real. So for example, with the wudu lesson, we teach obviously first of all the fiqh, okay, how to do it, okay, the basic. And then we look at the internal and external features of wudu. So by external, what part of the hands to wash, and etc. But then internal, what happens spiritually when we are washing our selves in wudu. And then after that, we try and bring in the environment. Okay, and coming off from the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, when he saw a companion doing wudu, using lots of water, wasting water. And Prophet ﷺ said to him, what is this extravagance? And the companion said, is there such a thing as extravagance in wudu? And Prophet ﷺ said, yes, even if you're performing ablution at a flowing stream, even then you can only use that much that is sufficient for you. So looking at how Prophet ﷺ protected the environment, but again, if you look at Prophet ﷺ's teachings there, he used wudu as a form, as a way of teaching about the environment. So that's what we've got to kind of tap into, that how Prophet ﷺ was teaching, and how we can kind of merge different ideas together to create new ways of understanding. So this is the Prophet ﷺ, he's using wudu to kind of touch upon the importance of protecting the environment. So that's another aspect. And then we do the traditional, what's become our thing every year, is to get students to muds. I think some of our students have about 3-4 of them at home. Right? So we could this year just be specific with those who don't have one. Because Mufti Hilal has to go all the way to, is it Bolton? And Mufti Hilal gets a massive box, isn't it? In the back of the boot. So we'll be more specific this time. And then we're trying to get rid of them and giving them to parents. So that challenge of making them use that small amount of water, and it helps. Even it shows them the practical side of wudu. I remember we were coming back from Istanbul we were at the airport. It took us quite long to get our baggage, and then what happened was we on the way we thought we'd miss Al Jummah if we were trying to get back to Walthamstow. So we found this place in Wembley. And then it was really cold, but we had water bottles, so we managed to do wudu outside our car. And then we went. So we could have only done that if we've practiced something like this before. We've gained that confidence. So that's another element of it. So again, the mud reinforces the idea of protecting the environment through not wasting, but at the same time, it's a practical thing that you could use as well. And one of the years we teamed up with MAID and collected money as well to make a well or build a well in Africa. So I think this time we're going to do that again whenever we do one of the wudu lessons, and that would preferably be taught in summer, because they're doing wudu aspect outside. So that's that. So that's what we want to do more, is make it relevant for them. And I spoke about this yesterday, that when we started the madrasa, we had like 4 ideas and everything to go around those 4 ideas. So for example, one of the points was that we want to make the syllabus relevant for the kids. That's one of the most key things, because for a lot of the teenagers, you're still a teenager, right? Yeah. For a lot of Ustad Saleh, are you still a teenager? Oh, subhanallah. So for a lot of the teenagers, Islam has become irrelevant, and that's a dangerous thing, and that plays into the whole atheism thing. But why do we have to follow Islam when it doesn't have any meaning to my life? And we have to create that meaning. But if Islam is a way of life, then we've got to show how, and how it could potentially be practiced in every kind of situation, even at school, even in primary school, secondary school. There's so many ways, and that's what needs to kind of feed into our lessons. So when you're in class at school, how can you be the best individual? How can you do the best that you can do and the best that you can be in the classrooms? in your school, when you're at home, when you go into the park. So we've got to make it relevant in that way. So for example, one of the ways the wudu lesson becomes relevant is whenever they open up their tap now, okay, they should become conscientious individuals and think, okay, all this water is being wasted. What do I do in order to protect this wastage? So right from the beginning of the day, they become conscious and they become individuals who think about every step that they take. I remember I was in a lecture once, and but the professor was mentioning, when we go to the masjid, we enter with our right foot. When we do something good, we do it with the right hand. This is building up our conscience. That at every time when I'm doing something, I'm doing it in the presence of Allah, and He's always watching me. And another important thing I mentioned to the parents yesterday was, and the reason I'm saying some of these things so we're on the same page with the parents, is if we were a mainstream school, our philosophy should have been such that we would not be affected or influenced by Ofsted's outstanding, or if we were to get outstanding, or good or satisfactory. That should have had no meaning to us, right? What should have meaning to us is if Prophet ﷺ was standing at the back with his clipboard and writing and observing us, how would we teach? Okay, so that is the challenge. That's the real challenge. If Prophet ﷺ was standing at the back, how would we speak to the students? What kind of attitude would we have with them? What would he want us to do with the children? How fun would he want us to make it? And how relevant would he want us to make it? That's one thing, but that's the thing that we should have in our minds. But at the same time, we've got to remember that Allah is always watching us when we're teaching. And that is the true Ofsted for us. Everything. Oh, just remembered something. I had a phone call just before, about 2 weeks before going to Turkey, from this organization called British Muslim Awards. So we were shortlisted for that. But then I think you have to start getting people to vote, and I think it was too long to do that. So unless teachers think that we should go for that. But I think maybe it might be opposed to our philosophy. But we can talk about that later on WhatsApp. What's the time? Oh, 10 to. Oh, good time. Yeah. So we've got to make it relevant for the children. That's incredibly important. That is relevant. They see meaning in what they are doing. So the way we do a lot of that is we're adding on, we're plugging in lots of things. So especially for students who are in Shanghai age group, okay, or on Saturday, Nana Asma, and at the same time, very important for Evelyn Cobalt. So we've got this other book that we are reading from for them. It's called Understanding of Islam, or Thinking Person's Guide to Islam, which is really good. It's written by one of the princes of Jordan. He's also a graduate from Cambridge University. He's an alim as well. So he wrote that book, and that we're going to be reading bits of that at times. Again, it's all the idea of, so a lot of things that we do, it kind of plugs into 1, 2, or 3 of those things that we initially had in mind. So it's got to be relevant. Number 2, it's got to be holistic, and that's what I was mentioning about the wudu thing, combining different fields and understandings. And it's something that we're going to push a lot now in the coming months and years is what from the Science and our Atheism in Islam lecture, what Mullah Uthman spoke about, Tawheedic universalism. That's what it is. That's what we want to pursue. And what we mean by that is, and the way I understood that, it was during the golden age of Islam. I think that term is misleading, but you just say 600-700 years ago, Muslim scholars and Muslim individuals, they were not just people who were becoming alims or muftis, or they were just doing fiqh. They were polymaths. So you would have one scholar who would be a scientist, a mathematician, an inventor, and also a faqih. Right? He would also be a mufti or a judge. That was because Muslims did not see a real difference between, for example, maths and Islamic studies or fiqh. For them, it was all organic, it was all together. And I strongly believe, from my research before, that a lot of it was due to the colonization that took place. So when the British came over to India, Pakistan, what today is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, They divided, and they call it the studies deen and dunya. They were the ones who made that divide. And that, I think, was a very big problem. That sent us back very, very long. Because they enforced upon us the European experience between faith and the secular realms. They had problems. Islam didn't have problems with science because Islam was pursuing science to the maximum. Okay? For example, Muslims needed to pray, they had to face the Qibla. They would use science as a form, as a method to find Allah in that sense. So for Muslims, science is a very positive thing. It wasn't the case with Europe. So when Europe did colonize us, they kind of forced that experience on us as well, and that will mess a lot of things up. So now you have ulama who are just graduating and they're just focusing on deen. They don't have any exposure to dunya, and that is a problem. And I'm saying this in the practical sense as well, where you'll have scholars here, and that's where I think the part-time madrasas, where a lot of our teachers go to or have been to, I think to an extent they are more successful, because you'd have people going to alima class or alim class here, they're studying the deen, but at the same time they're also at universities doing other things. So I think that is a powerful thing, the mixture and merging of both. But again, it's still two different institutes. So psychologically, you're always thinking of it as a different thing, right? So that's the problem. With Muslims, it wasn't two different things; it was together. So even the question of merging that word wouldn't come up, because for them everything was one. It was ilm. So this is what we need to reignite with the kids. And then for them, Islamic studies should be as important as maths, and vice versa. Science should be as important as Islamic studies or fiqh, and vice versa. We've got to introduce them both as important as each other, because it's through science as well that we can gain the knowledge of Allah, through philosophy as well. But anyway, that's some of the points. Yes, another thing was, one of the ideas we had was that our madrasa will also facilitate for children of different kinds of understanding, students with different kinds of levels of thinking. So we use the word, I remember it was in the PowerPoint, yes, it's hadi. So in the philosophical sense, hadi has two meanings. Okay? Hadi basically means guide. So we're taking that concept and we're using it in Islamic studies or using it in education. So one type of hadi is, so if you're going outside, you want to find your way to certain Tesco, you say, right? And you don't know the way, and you ask someone. Okay? Now this person automatically, he's going to become your educator. He's going to become your hadi, your guide. Now there's two different ways that this person can guide you. Okay? One is al-isal ila al-matlub, which is he holds you by the hand, okay, or puts you in the car and takes you to the destination. Okay? That's one method. The other one is ira'at al-tariq, where he doesn't take you or she doesn't take you there, but he gives you all the directions so that you yourself can get to the destination. Now, if you look at both, there's pros and cons for both methods. But what's needed now, and in the context of education, is the latter, is the second one, where we don't make them dependent on us. Right? We don't make them dependent on us. We facilitate them in the sense that once we give them the tools, they are now able to make their way in the world without us. And that's what Prophet ﷺ did. When he did pass away, the companion, there was a lot of challenges that the companions faced, without a doubt. There's so many challenges, but they were able to navigate through those very, very difficult times. And had they not been able to navigate through those times, then today the shape of Islam would have been very different. Possibly would have been non-existent. There were tribes that said, look, we're not going to pay zakat, for instance. We disagree with this. It was only around the time of Prophet ﷺ, we're no longer going to pay this. And then Abu Bakr, he did jihad against those tribes. So that's just one aspect of the difficulties that they were facing. And it felt as if everything was breaking, falling apart. But again, that's things like that take place, and they happen to make us go higher and higher and higher. So this is how we need to see things. We do have challenges. The idea is to not see them as problems, but to see them as stepping stones to go higher. So that was another thing that we spoke about, relevance. And then one of the most important things, which we mentioned was, and remember we were writing this at a time where there wasn't a FEC, there was no madrasa. One of the things, one of the bullet points was that we want to make sure that by the time a child leaves the madrasa, so for whatever reason, that the doors of Islam remain open. I mean, that's how bad the situation has become. That if the doors of Islam remain open for the child when he or she leaves, that means we are successful. And I think a step ahead would be if they leave with the love of Islam in their heart. And when we say love, that's the spiritual aspect. Okay? But also at the same time, the intellectual we need to do. So one of our mottos is transforming hearts and minds. Okay? So the reason why that's important, the intellectual, and I'll talk about this and we'll stop. The intellectual side is incredibly important, because if there is confusion in the mind, then that will straight away have impact on your spirituality. Right? If you're confused as to whether there is a God or not, okay, then that would impact your salah, because you'll think, you know what, I'm still unsure whether God exists. Then prayer is meaningless in this state, because who am I praying to? So that's why I think it's very important that we understand the importance of the spiritual, but at the same time the intellectual. And that's what we've got to kind of really bring into our lessons. So all these things we need to be bringing in. And we've got, the extra challenge for us is, students are with us only once a week, okay? And they are outside in schools 5 days a week. And not only that, it's about 6 hours a day. This lesson is not just a lesson. And this is the important thing, that when we are teaching, it's no longer a madrasa. Okay? It's no longer a lesson we are having in class. It's much bigger than that. Okay? We are literally on a battlefield of ideas. And those kids, they have this choice to make. Right? They have this choice to make. They have secular ideas which they are being taught in the most fun possible ways, in the most best settings and environments. And then they have the madrasa, okay, afterwards. And one of the reasons why we don't do 5 days of madrasa a week, I feel that it's going to overburden them. I'd rather they be overburdened at school, right, than at madrasa and have that thing about Islam being, oh, that place I went to and I got bored. Okay? Rather, our lessons need to really, it's got to be da'wah as well, basically, but in the most fun way possible. Okay? And so not direct da'wah where, they feel that we're pressurizing, no. But the kind of da'wah Prophet ﷺ gave through his life, through his example, and through the best form and method possible, through hikmah. So that's an important thing. When we are teaching, we've got to remember, as though Prophet ﷺ is offset at the back, how we would teach if he was observing us. And remember, Allah is always watching us. And that's what we need to bring in. So the whole idea of where the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, where he described spirituality, okay, he mentioned that, worship or be as though you are seeing Allah. Okay? And if you can't do that, then remember, Allah is always watching you. So this is the same state we need to be in the classroom. That how would I talk to this child when Allah is always watching me? Communicate with this child. Okay? Sometimes we have to be hard, but the important thing is we do it with the right intention, and that has a huge impact. Okay, so just to quickly add to that, and that will have an impact on the whole action that we're taking. Okay, so for example, it's quite funny actually. Maulana Ashraf Ali Tanwi, rahimahullah, he was a very famous scholar. He wrote like almost 1,000 books in his time, more or less, right? And he's also written this really big book on Maulana Rumi's, what's it called again? Maulana Rumi's Mathnawi, yeah. And it's about I think it's about 50 volumes, just that one book. I remember there's a bookshop where it was on sale, and you walk in and it takes up like 3 shelf space. So he once mentioned that if your child angers you, and this goes for teachers as well, some of it goes for teachers, and you're really angered by a child and is misbehaving completely, don't say anything to them at that point, because you're now angry. And the decision that you make then will have the opposite effect on the child, psychology and everything else. So, ask them to go outside for a little while, okay? And this is what he wrote. Ask them to go outside for a little while, cool down completely, totally, and then bring them back into the class, and then beat them up. That's exactly what he said. So, but obviously in this case it would be, allow them to leave that space for a little while, and then once you cool down, you calm down, then what you say to them, then that point be firm, right? You have to be firm at that point, but then the intention is different. It's like Ali radiallahu anhu, the story that we hear that he's fighting. Either it was one of the mushriks or it was a Jew in Khaybar, either one, and he managed to topple him over and jump on top of him, and he was about to kill him, but then that person spat at him. Okay, and now first his intention was for Allah, but now he's angered by the action of this individual. Now he's not doing it anymore, and he gets up and he walks away. And that person, it is believed, became Muslim because he thought, you were right on top of me. Why did you change your mind on killing me? And he said, because before my intention was for Allah, and then after you spat at me, my intention changed, and now it's for myself. So when we are talking to the children, we're not doing it for, it's not for ourselves, right? We're doing it in the sense that, we need to benefit the child and their future. And we need to think beyond that. Look, this lesson, another thing, important thing, this lesson that I'm teaching is not a lesson for here and now, and then they just need to remember for 1 week. No, there has to be something in this lesson that they take away for life. That's one thing. And secondly, this lesson that I'm teaching, I am going to have the intention for this to benefit the children of all of England. And Allah will make that happen. Okay? There are lessons like that. So I've been to so many places and done teacher training where I've used aspects of some of your lessons. I've taken them out and taught teachers in schools in Bolton, for example, right? And now they're going to take those ideas and spread them. So if our intentions are high, Allah will take them across. So we've got to have the cloud mentality, right? Where the cloud takes the water from one space, but it's not going to necessarily, rain in the same spot. It's going to rain maybe on the other side of the world. Yeah? So that's the intention we've got to have. And lastly, I'll finish with this. Really good book, written by. So, what's the time, guys?
7 minutes.
Oh, 7 minutes past. Okay, well, I'll do this within 3 minutes, inshallah, and then we can go back to class. So I was walking across a street in Istanbul, Sultan Ahmed, and then I saw a 500-year-old madrasa, so I just walked in. And then as I was walking in, there was like this movement called the Nursi movement, named after Sayyid Nursi. So first I thought they were going to ask me for money because they're being so nice to me. But then it's just part of their movement to, pull people in. So then I realized later on, it's a Nursi, guys. So I sat down with the brother who wrote this book, and then we had a long chat about Madrasa, Fatima Elizabeth, and then he just spoke about the text. So it's a really interesting book, because what this textbook does, and remember, we no longer rely on one textbook. So we have the Safar Academy books, you can use that for the Nasiha publication. We have the weekend learning, which is very good for the older students as well. And we have everything that's available online, which is good. This is a good textbook. It's aimed at, I think, kids of Changhai and even in Cobbled. Okay? But I think you can adopt aspects of it. So when you see a textbook, don't think about, okay, let me take lesson 3 and do the whole thing. No, you can just take activities from there. What I liked about this book, and I thought I'll mention this, is Sayyid Nursi was at a time, I remember this is during Ataturk's time, when Turkey is being proper, extreme secularized, and he is there trying to battle with that. Okay, and especially when it came to atheism and science and things like that. So his approach, this Sayyid Nursi's thing is basically like, it's more of an intellectual Tablighi Jamaat in Turkey. Okay, I hope that's not offensive, saying that the Tablighi is not but they're focused on science. A lot of their followers, they're academics as well. So the reason why I mention that is they use activities to teach kids Islam and about Allah, but at the same time using kinesthetic activities, bringing in science and all that. So just to give you one quick idea, see there's an activity where the kids make paper planes. Okay, they make paper planes, and then they get the chance to fly them around for a few minutes. Then they have to make second paper plane, and then they fly them around as well. And then the kids are asked which paper plane was more easier to make, and then they say the second one. And then the lesson that the teacher then emphasizes is, look, Allah made everything from scratch. Okay, is that harder to do, or to make, give you life again as your second life again? Is that more harder to do? So there's a lot of kinesthetic things like that. There's another one where they're teaching about Allah's creation, and it talks about get students to try and make a hexagon, okay, with all equal sides without using a ruler. Okay, so the kids, that's an activity, and once they do that, they all get rulers to measure it and see how have you made the whole thing all sides equal, and then obviously not. So then they talk about the honeycomb and how Allah makes every single hexagon in the honeycomb precise, and then talking about the creation of Allah in that way and how Allah is a perfect teacher. Another one was talking about angels, and I mean these are not really scientific, but it gives kids that that thing I'm talking about, that one thing that will stay for life with them. That's what we're talking about here. So there's another activity about angels. We can't see them. They don't exist. Therefore, we don't believe in something we don't sense. So there's a really good activity in here where I bought 3 of these, by the way, so you can have a look, inshallah, and I will be giving them out to the teachers, relevant teachers. Last thing, I'll finish off here. They get a glass. Give students so it could be like lukewarm water. Give students a cube of sugar. One student puts it in, mixes it in, right? It disappears. Another student comes, does his or her cube, and that disappears. And then ultimately, they get the students to ask, look, where is that cube of sugar? Okay, it's not there. So okay, now taste it. And then they can taste that from there. So that message is coming across, that not everything that you see, or not everything that you cannot see, does not mean it does not exist. You will maybe experience it in one way, shape, or form. And again, like we're saying, you can't have a perfect example, but this gives them something to think about. Okay, something to think about during their lives. And there's many more examples like that. They have this for almost every. So this is basically the fundamentals of belief. So we have the books of Allah, the angels, and then for each one that have these kinesthetic activities. Again, why are they doing that? It's going back to Sayyid Nursi's Risale-e-Nur, which main book that he wrote. That's something that they kind of have their halaqas on, and they sit down and read. So this is something which I would definitely recommend. And when you're doing that, do let me know. We can take video. I promise that we'll send them, that lesson in action kind of thing, which they could use. So we'll stop here, inshallah. If you have any questions, we'll continue that on WhatsApp. Subhanallah, bihamdi, subhanakallah.